Hello, hello. Oh, good to see people here live. Say hello in the chat. And we're going to make this interactive, okay? This is an EFT EFT webinar I'm going to do for you guys, and I would love to do some tapping specifically with some of you who are watching. But what I want to do first is kind of lay the groundwork so you can start using this tool by yourself. Let me know who's here. Say hi in the chat, just so I can see. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about EFT. I'm going to tell you how it works, and I'm going to give you some basic skills so that you can use this whenever you need. So EFT is just really one of the best tools that I've ever come across, and I think, like a lot of you, I suffered from really bad anxiety and panic attacks when I was drinking, and that kind of trickled over into my sobriety as well, but I didn't have my anesthetic of alcohol. So it just was really hard to just white knuckle that, and I wish I'd known how to use EFT. And I came across it when I was about maybe 4 years sober, something like that. And I was getting asked to do a lot of public speaking. I was getting asked to tell my story and talk about alcoholism and different groups and things. And I always wanted to do it because I kind of love that stuff. But I would get this crippling, like, just anxiety before speaking. So leading up to the event, I just get more and more sick to my stomach. The day of, an hour before, I would just want to cancel it, make up some excuse or lie so I didn't have to do it. I never did that. I always pushed myself, because once I got started, I was fine. It was just before. So I was telling someone about this at an event I was at, and she was an EFT practitioner. And I was telling her, and she said, "Oh, I can help you with that. I do something called EFT." And she explained what it was and tapping. And I was like, that's very bizarre, because it looks a bit bizarre when we first do it. And this is back like at least 17 years ago. EFT is really, really big now, especially in the UK, really taken off in the UK. It's taking off in the USA as well. So I was open to it, and off I went, and I did 2 sessions, and she completely solved my anxiety about public speaking. I get maybe a little flutter in my tummy before, but no big deal. And I was kind of like, wow, that's amazing. And then I went back for some issues around food, and I saw her several times for different things. And I just found it incredibly helpful. So I was already a psychotherapist at that point, so I did the training. I did the EFT level 1 and 2 training. I've done the matrix re-imprinting training because I wanted to be able to use this. So here's the difference between psychotherapy and EFT. There is great benefit and power with talking to a therapist and beginning to have that cognitive change as we process past events, make sense of them, make connections. I am all for that. But there's also lots of people who have trauma and really difficult events that have happened in their life that are very emotional for them, and they don't want to talk about them. They don't want to spend weeks or months talking about this painful, traumatic, difficult issue. And EFT is made for that, because you can resolve trauma, the past pain and hurt that is kind of still, shows up in our present. You can resolve it with EFT, and you don't have to really talk about it very much at all. So I've had a client who I worked with years ago who had different trauma, and we called it the event at the bus stop. Now, I could kind of guess what happened, but he never explicitly told me. And we were able to use EFT to go through that event and to take the emotional pull from it. So the premise of EFT is that all negative emotions are due to a disruption in the body's energy system. So it uses, EFT is a combination of Chinese acupressure and modern psychology. And what we tap on is the points that acupuncturists use. If you're interested, EFT, I'm not going to go into this here, but EFT was kind of not created, but refined by a Stanford engineer called Gary Craig. I think he's still alive, actually. He's quite old now, but it developed out of a Chinese acupuncture and psychology and another modality called thought field therapy. So it kind of evolved out of that, and we're tapping on meridian points. So the basic technique requires you to focus on a negative emotion. For instance, how you feel about something that happened, a bad memory, an unresolved problem, something that's bothering you. While focusing on these feelings, we tap on meridian points to release the negative emotions. EFT accesses the amygdala, the part of your brain that initiates your body's reaction to fear, your fight or flight response. So tapping on these acupressure points reduces the intensity of the feelings quite dramatically, and it restores calm, which enables us to make better decisions. So that's the basis of it. Hold on, let me just get up. I've got some more notes I wanted to go over. So if you think about when we have negative experiences in our life, we often just keep absorbing that stuff in our bodies. We just absorb it and we don't release it. We don't release these emotions. When I did some of my training, we were watching these videos of animals that were being attacked, the deer that's being attacked by the lion, and off it runs, and the lion almost gets it, and it just manages to get away, and then the lion gives up because it can't run for that long, and the gazelle or the deer is safe. And then once it realizes it's safe and it's out of danger, it does this shaking, and what it's doing is releasing all of the fear and the emergency feelings in its body. It's releasing. But we don't do that as human beings. We just don't. We absorb our negative feelings and we don't release them. EFT releases them. Am I making sense so far? Any questions so far? You can just put them in the chat and I'll check as we go. Rihanna has done, level 1 EFT is training to just sort of use on yourself really and friends. Level 2 is and 3 is where you can use it on other people. So very basically, EFT is tapping on meridian points, and I think nearly all of you have done some tapping with me, and I'm going to show you what they are in a minute, whilst repeating certain statements in order to correct emotional energy. So the theory is that once our energy meridians are balanced, the emotional intensity of our thoughts will go away. And that's the bit that's incredible. So I'll give you an example of this. You may have seen, I posted this last year. So we have a gorgeous puppy. And I was walking my kids to school with the dog. It was in June last year. I just dropped my kids off, thank God. And these two dogs appeared from nowhere, a pit bull and a husky. And they attacked my dog really badly. They had him by the throat. They were shaking him. One had on. It was really horrible. And I was screaming. I was, 1 minute we were fine. The next minute we were in this life and death situation. I wasn't thinking straight. So I tried to pull them off and they bit all of my hands. My hands all swelled up. And thank God we were in quite a fairly busy area. There was traffic and people got out of their cars and two men came over and kicked the dogs away and saved us. And Cadbury was just lying on the floor in shock. And I didn't know if he was going to be okay. I was hysterical. It was really horrible. I had to call my husband. An ambulance arrived. The fire brigade arrived. It was a big thing. And I'm so terrified. My puppy is so cute. He's just a ball of love bug fluff. He's just lovely. So I never thought a dog attack was going to be something to be concerned about. I now prepare myself. He went to the vet. I went to the hospital. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it just was going over and over in my mind. I mean, I couldn't sleep. And it was all over the local Facebook community. Thousands of people were commenting, blah, blah, blah. and people were asking me, are you okay? And I would tell the story over and over and over again. And it was very activated in me. So when we have something that's activated, and it could be something from years ago, and we either start thinking about it or we tell the story, and the emotions are very activated. Does everybody know what I mean by that? No. So if I told you what I had for breakfast today, there's no real emotion to that. Say, I made some porridge, I made some oatmeal, and then I put some peanut butter in it, and I used water instead of milk. Like, I can just tell you that story. I'm also not very interested in telling you that story because it's just like not very interesting to me. But before I did EFT on this, every time, like, I would see people and they say, oh my God, I saw that you were attacked by a dog. Are you okay? And what happened? And I'd go into the story. Well, I was walking home from dropping the boys off, and I'd feel like it feels very current. The activation is the emotion. I could feel like the anger building in me and all of that kind of stuff. That's what being activated means. Now, I knew I was traumatized, I knew the dog was traumatized, and I knew that I could solve that with EFT. So I went and did 3 sessions with my EFT trainer on this story. And the way we did it is a technique called telling the story. So he would get me to tell the story from the beginning, and as soon as I had an emotional peak, so I would say, like, so I dropped the kids off, and then I crossed the road, and then I looked up and saw these dogs coming towards me. And that sentence is when I started to feel like an emotion in me. And we would tap on that specific, I saw the dogs coming towards me. And that would bring down the intensity of it. And then I would start again, and we went through the whole story. Now, what happened at the end is I was able to release all of those difficult and negative feelings I had about that specific event. So what I mean about being activated and not activated, after I'd done the EFT, people would still ask me, like, well, what happened with your dog? And I'd say, oh, it was, he was attacked by a pit bull and a husky, and it was really awful, but we're much better now. That's kind of as much as I wanted to say about it, because I just didn't feel a pull. I didn't feel activated by the story to want to go in it and go over it. I just couldn't really be bothered. So I, in a nutshell, just gave people the kind of, little headline of it, and that we're all fine now. Before I did the EFT, it was very active in me. And if you asked me, I wanted to tell you the whole thing blow by blow, like every and this, and then I felt that, and I was horrified, and oh my God. Does everyone kind of see the difference? That's what EFT can do. So if you have a specific event that feels active for you, that still has emotional pull, EFT can change that. It will release, and it's not that it erases the memory, it's that I can tell the story of Cadbury and I being attacked without those really awful emotions being activated in me again, because it was really horrible. I don't want to feel like that again, and all of the guilt and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, so we can deactivate things. So sometimes, for some of us, it's not a specific event. Sometimes it's not, like, we don't know. But it might be, for instance, you are in your office and your boss is quite shouty, and everyone around you is like, here he goes again. Nobody seems bothered. But when your boss shouts, like, your heart races and you feel sick, and it really affects you. The reason for that is probably something from your childhood. You may have forgotten the event, but your body hasn't forgotten the feelings when given a specific trigger. Does that make sense? We can have quite, like, almost feels like unbalanced emotional responses to an outside event, And we don't kind of know why, but we really can feel like freaked out. The reason for that is probably linked to a past event. So you don't have to know what the past event is. It doesn't matter at all. You can use EFT to resolve how it's showing up in your body, which will then resolve the event from the past. It's what I talk about in the pillar of process, the past showing up in our present. Makes sense? Okay. Anita, EFT doesn't sweep things under the carpet. It doesn't do that. What EFT does is process. So we want to process through these events and these emotions. So what happens is, say we have a particularly traumatic episode, we can perhaps do some EFT on that specific episode. So that when we talk about it, we don't really feel a strong emotional attachment to it anymore. It feels like we've moved. That's what EFT does. It moves us because we get stuck in things. So it might be that trauma can also show up in different ways. So that event is resolved, but it kind of shows up here and there. That's okay. We can just do some more EFT. And what happens is you collapse that kind of whole thing so that it no longer owns you. EFT is about process. I do write about this in my book, actually, as one of the tools with EMDR that we can use. EFT is about, it's not sweeping stuff under the carpet. It's not about erasing. It's so that Cadbury, and I did EFT with my dog. I do it with my kids as well. It's so that event is not playing over and over in my mind, and I'm not getting that like feeling. Now, I will tell you, just the other day I was walking Cadbury and there was a woman out with 2 dogs off leash who came bounding towards us, and that always makes me a bit nervous. Like I'm quite like come near my dog, and if I see 2 unleashed dogs kind of coming towards us, I don't know if they're safe or nice dogs. So I'm very kind of, but it's not disproportionate. I'm kind of grateful that I'm much more alert to this, because I now know dog attacks are quite a big thing. I didn't realize that before I had a dog. So I could perhaps do some more EFT on, when dogs come towards me, but it's not really owning me. It's not really bothering me. It's just in that instant, I'm kind of quite alert. So the EFT is how we get free and process through things. Does that make sense? Yeah, Abby said, I found my trigger from childhood through therapy. Wonderful. That's why therapy can be really helpful. But I never knew how to try and resolve my reaction to the trigger later in life. And so I would really love for you to try EFT, Abby, with a professional. Who's experienced in trauma and all of that kind of stuff. So going back to my dog attack. So what we really break this down. So again, I told the story, and there was no, I dropped my kids off at school, not a strong emotional attachment to that. I walked across the road, not a strong emotional attachment to that. And I saw these 2 dogs coming towards me. That's when my emotions kind of went beep, and we tapped on that. And we specifically did, like, even though the 2 dogs were running towards me, right here and now I'm safe and loved. So we did it it's almost like you do it scene by scene by scene. And then we went back, we told the story, and every time we told the story, the bit we had tapped on didn't have that like emotional peak. And then I tell a bit more, and that, and suddenly they were there right in front of me. And that had a big like, and we would tap, even though they were suddenly there right in front of me. So you really, really break it down. EFT has lots of techniques like that. Telling the story is one of them, where you just go through like slice by slice. And so that whole incident was maybe 30 minutes, and it took 3 sessions for us to tap it all out, so that I could then, and then what would happen at the end is my EFT practitioner saying, okay, tell me the story from the beginning. And I was like, well, across the road, and then they came towards me, and they were right in front of me, and it was pretty awful. It's just, it doesn't have that emotional pull. It's not living in me anymore. It's not living in me. Other techniques are the movie technique, which is a technique where we can be more separate from the event. We can be in a movie theatre and we can see the event playing out on a screen, but we're in a nice safe movie theatre, and we can tap on specific things like that. And by the way, these are techniques you would use with a skilled practitioner. Another one that's very good is called chasing the pain. And EFT really links what pain in the body to emotions. So often we could start on like, oh my back, and just and tap on the pain, and you can really diminish pain through using EFT. And if it's linked to something emotional, you can get there by starting with the pain. I remember when I had a root canal and I had a pain that was a tooth that was really, really painful. I could tap it down. Now, it kept coming back up because it was a root canal and it needed a root canal, but I could keep tapping it down so it was a bit more manageable. So EFT can also help a lot with physical pain. So let's do a little bit of tapping. I want to show you, this is what we call the basic recipe. So Gary Craig, who sort of pioneered EFT, he was an engineer, and he reduced down, because there's several hundred meridian points in our bodies, he reduced it down to the ones that we need to create an effect. So I'll show you where to tap, and then we'll talk about the basic recipe and the setup statement. So you tap on the side of your hand, the karate chop point, we call it. Either side doesn't matter. And you can tap with 2 fingers or 1 finger, or like that, whatever feels more comfortable for you. Now, different practitioners sometimes go in different sequences. I go here first. Sometimes people go to the eye first, but I go here. And then from there, we go to the eye socket. Either eye doesn't matter, but it needs to be at the beginning of the eyebrow on the eye socket. So not up here, on the eye socket. That's really important. We're on this eye socket here, 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 here. So there's 3 places on the eye socket. Beginning of the eyebrow, end of the eyebrow, underneath the eye. Between the nose and top lip, between the bottom lip and the chin and that little dent that we have there, and then on the chest. And this is on the chest is, we call it the sore spot. It's a gland, and it's right there. If you press it, it's just easier if you do it with your whole hand, you'll hit it, than trying to be specific about where it is with the sort of end of your fingers. It's just easier. And then underneath your arm, for ladies, that's where your bra strap is. And it looks weird, doesn't it look weird? I'm so used to it now. And those are the basic points that we tap on when we do a sequence. Now there's also some other points that we can tap on, and we can do these more privately. We can do our fingers like that. It's actually on the side of our nail bed here. So you could do that under the table. You could do it like this and nobody would know what you were doing. And you can also do your wrist. This side here and this side here, where your watch strap would be. So those are 2 extra points. Sometimes I use them, but they're not necessary in the basic sequence. So that's where we tap. Any questions about that? If you're commenting, just make sure that you switch the little drop down thing to everybody so everybody can see what you're saying. How long do you tap for? That's a good question. It doesn't matter, but between 4 and 8 taps roughly. If you do 3 or you do 19, it doesn't matter. But roughly between 4 and 8 taps. And I don't count them. I just I'm not counting them. You don't need to do that. You can kind of feel. The other thing that some people do, and I used to be a double tapper and I'm not anymore, is you can double tap. And you know, I think the EFT community is still kind of split on is there a difference. Some people just prefer to, and I used to be, because I'd be like, more, because I'm a person of more. And now I've gone back to single tapping, and I don't think it really makes any difference. But some people are double tappers, and that's absolutely fine. So you just do a few taps here. I probably do more than 8. And again, it doesn't really matter. Don't count them. So you can just tap and breathe, and that will help you feel, that will help you relax. It will bring down any emotional intensity. Don't worry about, you can't do EFT incorrectly. Like, it's impossible to do it wrong on yourself. If you're not experienced or skilled or qualified, don't do it on anybody else. But you're not going to harm yourself by just tapping. And if you miss out a couple of spots, doesn't matter. In fact, the EFT community modified EFT during the first pandemic. We modified it so we weren't on the face. We didn't go on the face. We went here instead, because that was COVID safe tapping, was to not put our fingers like directly on our face there. So, and you can still have all the benefits. Oh, you good question, Anita. Do you only do this when you experience a negative emotion? Can you start your day with it? Absolutely, I sometimes do. It's gonna, you know, even if we're feeling okay, it's gonna help us. So it's just a tapping and breathing is a great way to start your day. If you notice that you're becoming emotionally deregulated, if something's beginning to build up or whatever, just tap and breathe. Does EFT help with PMS? Oh my goodness, I am really suffering with perimenopause, and I get these kind of like days before my period comes where I have this like depression kind of for like 2 days. So yes, tapping and breathing just lifts everything. It eases everything. So it can help with all kinds of things. If you're doing it on yourself, sometimes it's trial and error, you know, to see what does help. But just tapping and breathing is going to help you with all kinds of different symptoms. So I want to talk about the basic recipe. Hold on, where's my notes? Put any questions that you've got in the oh, there it is. Okay, so that's the tapping and breathing. Yes, Laurie, it helps when anger is rising, because if anger is rising, we're becoming emotionally deregulated. Now remember, anger is not a bad emotion. It's just how we respond to it. So it's not a bad emotion. And anger is very necessary to get things done sometimes and make change, but we don't want it to own us and deregulate us. So what we have in EFT is called the basic recipe, which is where I showed you to tap, and the setup statement. So the setup statement is it's an affirmation and self-acceptance, and it's important to understand this. The affirmation acknowledges the problem, and then the other part of the statement creates self-acceptance despite the problem. Now, we're not accepting the problem in that it's fine to have this problem. We're just acknowledging it. I acknowledge this problem. So the setup statement is, even though the dogs were running towards me, which was the problem. The other part of that is self-acceptance, and we can use several different things. The standard one is, even though the dogs were running towards me, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. all we're doing is accepting ourselves in this place where we are right now. It's not accepting the problem. We're acknowledging the problem. There's a difference. Can everyone see the difference between acknowledging that this thing exists and accepting ourselves despite it? That's what the statement does. And it doesn't really matter if you believe the affirmation or not. We just say it. So there's other things you can say at the end of that. Sometimes saying I deeply love and can accept myself, people can't do that. They don't feel like that about themselves, so they'll feel a kind of rejection of that. That's fine. So we can say things like, even though the two dogs were running towards me, that's just how it was. That's just an acceptance of acceptance of the situation. Even though the dogs were running towards me, that's just how I feel. Another one that I use when people are, it's a difficult emotion, maybe a trauma, is even though the dog's running towards me, right here and now, I'm safe and loved. And that's a really good grounding one. It's because, remember I said that the amygdala gets activated, and that's our fight or flight or freeze. What we're doing with that statement is acknowledging that right here in this room, there's nothing threatening to me. There's no life or death situation in this room right now. So I may be acknowledging a painful memory or event where I felt very frightened and unsafe. What we're also doing is accepting and acknowledging that right here and now, I am safe and loved in this moment, right here. Does that make sense, everybody? So we acknowledge the problem and we accept ourselves anyway. That's what we're doing. It's a balance. Acknowledge the problem and we accept ourselves anyway. And you can play around with what you say at the end to whatever feels like it's right for you. So if you want to start to practice this on yourself, we repeat the setup statement 3 times. Now, the reason for this is it's really to access, your brain kind of goes off and accesses whatever it is. So that's why we say it 3 times. So let's say let's tap on something really simple. Who has something we want to tap on? And we can tap on that, and we can all tap along. Yes, you could. Paul has said you can do it ahead of time. That's good. We'll do that. Anxiety. So absolutely, and that's what really helped me a lot with the public speaking. Is I really pictured it in my mind, and we tapped very specifically on it. So okay, so we're going to acknowledge the problem. Even though I have this anxiety about the situation I have to go into, right here and now I'm safe and loved. So what you're doing, if you're tapping along with me, your brain is accessing the thing that you are anxious about. So we can all say the same thing and do the same thing. It's called borrowed benefits, but your brain will access what it is you are anxious about. So even though I have this anxiety about this situation I have to go into, right here and now I'm safe and loved. Now you can add one more component to this, and that's to describe how you feel anxiety in your body. EFT, however you do it, you're going to get a benefit. To really be really effective, we need to get specific. So you could be, even though I have this anxiety, it's in the bottom of my stomach and it's like a tightening about this event that I'm going to. Right here and now I'm safe and loved. So what that's doing is linking our emotions to the physical sensation in our body. And we describe how we experience it in our bodies. And don't worry how you do this. I mean, I've had, I experience it as a squishy thing in my chest. It doesn't matter. You know what that means. So you can be very inelegant with your words. So we do this 3 times, even though I have this anxiety. It's in the bottom of my stomach. It's like a tightening about this event that I have to go to. Right here and now, I'm safe and loved. And then, after we've done that 3 times, we go around all of the meridian points and we just do what we call a reminder statement. So we don't need to say the whole same thing, we just say the reminder. So you might say anxiety, anxiety in my body, in my stomach, anxiety, 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 anxiety. And then take a deep breath and notice how that feels in your body. If you tapped along with me, how does that feel in your body? So one of the things that I would do with clients is I would say, like, on a score of 0 to 10, how anxious are you? And they would say like an 8.5. So we would tap on the anxiety and see if we can bring that number down. So we might, if then I would say, you know, oh, it's a 6 now, which is great, but we want to get that a bit lower than a 6. So then we could just continue, even though I have this remaining anxiety in my stomach that feels all squishy about this thing I have to do. Right here and now, I'm safe and loved. So we can then continue to do it and see if we can bring down that number even lower. It's amazing how much stuff we hold in our bodies. All of this negative feelings that we constantly need to process and release. So general EFT, which is when we're just tapping generally, which is what we just did about anxiety, that's very general, will help you emotionally regulate and feel better. If you want to resolve something, you need to get very specific. So like I gave you the example with the dog, we were, you know, very specific about each little slice of it. You know, I looked up and the dogs were running to me full pelt, like very specific. And then I didn't understand what was going on. And so we would tap very specifically is how you really resolve stuff. There's also a wonderful practice that I love called matrix re-imprinting, which is a whole way of going back. We can't change what happened in the past, and we can't like erase memories, but what we can do is go back and change the meaning that we gave events in the past. So if stuff that happened to us as children affected us in a certain way and we've carried that our whole lives, there's a really fabulous technique called matrix re-imprinting where we tap in very specific ways. It's too complicated to go into here, and we can change how we feel about this thing that happened in the past. We still have the memory of it, we still know it happened, but it doesn't have its emotional hold over us, and we feel differently about it. So anyone who has any kind of trauma or difficult childhood memories, I really urge you to go and find a really good practitioner. It can really, really help. So before I wrap up, any questions that anybody would like to ask, put it in the chat and I'll try and get to them. Sarah, does this work for shame or embarrassment, like events, moments from the past? That's exactly what it works for. Anything that gives us, makes us feel whatever the feeling is, we can absolutely free ourselves from it. And in fact, that example I was giving you of the client I worked with years ago, where he had this incident that haunted him. It just really haunted him. The incident at the bus stop. My guess was it was quite shameful. If something happened to him as a child, and we just got to a point where it just didn't have a hold on him anymore. That's what we want. EFT is a process tool. So the 5 pillars of sobriety: movement, connection, balance, process, and growth. Process is about being free of the past, whether it's trauma or shame or embarrassment or anything like that. EMDR, I don't know a lot about EMDR. I don't practice it, but I do know practitioners, and I also think it's a very effective modality. This is what I do know as a therapist. Different things work for different people. And you kind of just have to go into things and figure that out. And, what works for one person may not have the same effect for you. So, lots of people loving EMDR. Some people didn't feel they had a great time with the EFT. And maybe it was the practitioner. Maybe you need to go to a different practitioner, give it 2 or 3 tries or whatever. But I do find that different things and different practitioners work for different people. You can do EFT anywhere. I do have sample scripts, but you can just Google it. It's all over the internet. There's lots of great research that has come out. So there's some great research now, really solid research that supports its efficacy. The National Health Service in the UK and Kaiser in California have both approved EFT as a treatment for veterans suffering from PTSD. It's really shown some incredible effects with PTSD in that client group. So that it's gone through the kind of rigorous clinical approval processes in those 2 areas is really encouraging, because it's been seen as a wacky thing for a long time. Yes, I get motion sickness as well, and I've used EFT for it as well. So I'm going to wrap up there. I hope that was helpful. I always try and do some tapping in my Thursday support group. So I always start with a little bit of tapping. And I often teach it in some of my coaching groups, just because I want to be able to emotionally regulate people I'm just starting a group called Emotional Sobriety, and I'm going to be teaching EFT at the beginning of that, because, stuff will come up and I want to be able to regulate people. And you can, there's tons of stuff to Google. Oh, well done, Abby. Thank you so much. This is her first event. Well done. We do workshops every so often on different things, and I'm sure I'll do another EFT one at some point. But I'm going to wrap things up there, and the recording will be available for everybody else. Thanks so much.